Have you ever wondered why Africa, known as the world's most resource rich continent, still struggles with poverty? Growing up, I've always wondered how a continent rich in diamonds, gold, and fertile farmland could rely on imports for basics like chicken and wheat. Why we've never produced cars or smartphones locally. To understand how we got here, let's rewind to the key moments that shape our reality. It all started when Europeans, specifically the Portuguese, explored Africa in the 1400s for gold. Although trading gold in Africa was nothing new, it was monopolized by the North African Islamic states. So, to bypass them, the Portuguese, who were led by Prince Henry the Navigator, traveled by sea. When they got there and saw the wealth in West Africa, they decided they wanted to do more than just a trade. First, they built fortified trading posts. These posts connected them with African trade systems that were already in place. They set up posts along the coast in areas where local merchants traded gold, ivory, and spices. The Portuguese traded European goods like cloth and weapons for natural resources. At first, this partnership was very beneficial to both the Portuguese and the Africans. The Africans would regularly trade resources for guns, military help, and access to the advanced technology that the Portuguese came with. However, it wasn't long until this trade system caused problems. One of the biggest issues was that African economies became dependent on European goods while the Portuguese controlled the rules of the trade. By the late 1800s, other European countries came to Africa and wanted access to the same raw materials that the Portuguese had. This is what led to the scramble for Africa, where European nations divided the continent into colonies to exploit its wealth. On the 15th of November 1884, 13 European nations got together to decide which parts of Africa each nation wanted. They drew borders without considering the people that lived there. These borders often grouped enemies together and split communities. After taking control, European powers stripped Africa of its natural resources. They exported raw materials like minerals and crops to Europe, where they were processed and sold for profit. This left African communities underdeveloped and dependent on Europe. Colonial governments also forced Africans to pay heavy taxes. Many had to work in European controlled industries to pay these taxes. The system kept Africans tied to colonial economies while taking away their wealth and independence. Even after getting independence, many African nations were often left with unfair agreements. These deals usually benefited the former colonial powers, leaving African countries struggling to rebuild. For example, former French colonies were tied to France through deals that controlled their economies and politics. France maintained influence over their resources, military, and even their currency. African leaders who didn't comply faced political instability and threats of coups. For example, when Guinea decided to issue its own national currency in 1960, France organized an operation to destabilize the new country. They sent in Secret Service agents and flooded the economy with false banknotes, disrupting everything. Even today, many African nations grapple with these agreements. In some cases, leaders sign trade agreements or resource extraction deals that guarantee corporations control over natural resources. What makes this worse is that the money earned from these deals rarely improves the lives of locals. Instead, a lot of it is funneled into the pockets of corrupt officials or used to pay off external debts. For example, in Nigeria, despite being one of the largest oil producers in the world, a significant portion of oil revenues has been lost to corruption. And in Angola, billions of oil revenue have been reported missing due to mismanagement and embezzlement, leaving ordinary citizens in poverty despite the country's immense wealth. Ultimately, this is what keeps many African nations trapped in the same cycle of poverty. As an optimist, I believe we have what it takes to turn things around and take control of our future. But it's going to take more than just a few good leaders to truly break from the cycle.